Welcome to the Christmas Blue Room, I suppose we can call it this week, even though we're probably going to do a couple of podcasts before Christmas Day itself. It feels like we're getting towards the big day, the 25th of December. I'm talking to a couple of Blue Room gentlemen here right now. I wish this was actually recorded. No, Les is used to recording things video-wise for YouTube for the mailbag. And there's a touch of there's a mailbag theme on this a little bit in terms of questions I'm going to ask these two lads. But it's Les Roberts and it's Adam Sutton. How are you, boys?
All good. Surely the 26th is the big day, not the 25th.
Well, it depends how you look at it, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've been enjoying the World Cup without any sort of
26 could be Armageddon.
About watching football. I'm not looking forward to Boxing Day at all.
Adam, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very good. I think total opposite to Les, really. I think I'm going to get so bladdered on the 25th that I forget the 26th is even happening. But I've been enjoying the World Cup as well, actually. Yeah. I enjoyed the World Cup more than I thought I would, but I've also been enjoying the World Cup because Everton don't play in the World Cup. But yeah, there's a part of me, a little small part of me, that's thinking, get a result on Boxing Day and just pull you back in, don't they?
That's it. That's exactly right, mate. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about first of all, because we asked a question on the Blue Room saying, you know, what are the best, worst EFC related festivities around Christmas time, matches, presents, anything like that, nights out that you've had that maybe you've been great, or you might have met your wife years ago when you've gone on your Christmas night out, anything like that, or anything associated with Yelovich coming out of the box for a kid's Christmas present. That was a top one. And the thing that I actually posted, if nobody's seen it yet, is Bobby Martinez himself gone shopping in Wigan, Curry's, and some lads just put a photo on seeing him on Saturday. The Saturday just gone, by the way. So you'd imagine being the football manager that he is, even though he's been woeful at Belgium recently, and he went out really early in the World Cup. He's rocked up in Wigan to the Curry's, probably to get, I don't know, a telly or something like that. You'd imagine he'd still be there in Qatar as like somebody who's obsessed with his football and whatnot, maybe searching for a new job. No, he's rocked up at Curry's in Wigan, and this lad just got a photo of him. I think it's absolutely hilarious. So I'll let you two think about those sort of questions. Go on, Les.
My biggest issue with the Martinez thing is he's learned nothing because he's still wearing non-inappropriate outerwear. It was like snowing outside and it was freezing. It was horrible, and he's wearing a camel coat. He needs some better outerwear. This is where it went wrong at Everton. He kept wearing that light autumn jacket throughout the winter, and he fucked it. And that's where it went wrong at Everton. And he's not.
The only disappointing thing is he hasn't showed his. You can't see his shoes on it. The photo hasn't gone that deep, has it?
Well, he was wearing all sorts of beige, so there's absolutely no doubt that he had brown shoes on.
The brown's back, isn't it? But more pertinently, though, I think as well. I'll throw this to you, Adam, first. A lot of people, I think it's actually increased. Certainly since those two Bournemouth games before the World Cup started. But a lot of people getting itchy feet with Frank Lampard in charge. You see Roberto Martinez edging closer and closer towards Merseyside. I mean, in literal terms, Les is already shaking his head. But would you see Bobby come back in, mate, if Frank Lampard goes anytime soon?
Shows how fickle and just like stupid Everton fans are if we believe that Roberto Martinez could come back to Everton. After all, I think we're so quick to forget actually how bad that period was at the end.
But was it this bad, though? Was it this bad?
Yeah, because I remember I was stood in Anfield, 4-0 down with about half an hour to go. And I don't get that angry at the game because I find it cringy sometimes.
Which one of the 4-0s was it, though? There
were
two of them, weren't there?
Yeah, the worst one. The Funes Mori one, actually.
The second one, that wasn't the Funes, because we actually played all right. I remember, and I will die on this hill, that the first 4-0 defeat, we actually looked all right for most of the game. Just conceded ridiculous 4 goals when that dickhead Sturridge was there, wasn't it?
The second one was, I remember I was screaming at the pitch, and then I walked out the ground, and I thought, like, that was embarrassing what you were doing there. And I was like sober. I was on my own as well. I don't know why I was there on my own.
Sounds like punishment, this one.
It was punishment. And I was walking across Stanley Park and I just went like, that's one of the lows. And that was just a common theme at the time, wasn't it? Like, everyone says it, don't they? We had Moyes' defence and Martinez attack, and then as soon as that Moyes defence disappeared, and we stopped practicing defending corners and set pieces and defending in general, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, long story short, no, wouldn't have him back, and yeah, he needs to stop edging his way towards Merseyside and go a little bit more north to other wool towns in and around that area where I'm from, actually.
No, I'm on with 2 Wolves tonight, aren't I? And Les is by far the worst one I've ever met.
I maintain I'm not a Wool, I'm a Plazzy.
What do you mean? Explain this. Come on, why are you a Plazzy?
Well, from over here, we're plastic scousers, aren't we?
Where were you actually born, Les?
Birkenhead.
You're actually born in Birkenhead, the place itself.
Yeah. I was born in a hospital in Birkenhead that's now knocked down. It was called Grangemouth. It was in the middle of Birkenhead.
It's a hard man to admit that.
No one else, basically no one else was born there, I don't think. Everyone over
the time when you were born.
Yeah, honestly, everyone over here was born at St. Cat's, or most people were. There's only a few people I know who were born at Grangemouth. So yeah, I was born in Birkenhead. And,
do you know what's funny about like both of your accents here? I'm not criticizing, no place to criticize anybody really, but accent wise, I reckon you, Les, you could convince me that you're not from over the water. Like if you,
yeah, a lot of people have said that to me.
Yeah,
like if they don't know, like it was on Jack. I went out for Jack's stag do in town, and I met up with a few of his relatives, like from over this side, and they, because they met me in the context of just being out in town, they thought it was a Scouser. I've been so horrified in my life.
Well, do you know what? It's funny because when me and Matt first met Adam, when he joined the Blue Room, a few years ago now, and he massively impressed me because of how well spoken he was, to be honest with you. So I can't really criticize his woolly back voice. Do you know what I mean? And he's also said some things before we started recording this particular podcast. He was telling me about his family's days around Notty Ash and places around where I live right now. So I think he gets a free pass from me, to be honest with you.
Oh, I'm like 100% Birkenhead to the whole family.
But you know what though, Dave? I'm proud to be a Wool. I wouldn't. What
you've got to sell this now, mate. You've got to sell this.
What really cringes me is that when people like it used to be like cool, didn't it? And I think it still is cool with like younger kids coming up. Like you have to have the most Scout accent in the world.
Yeah.
You ever go through Skem? They are not Scouts, but you'd think they were. The worst thing I can think of is like trying to be a Scouter when I'm not. I've got Scout family and Scout heritage, and we all say Scout words and slang, but I am not from Liverpool, and I never claim to be, and never necessarily want to be, because I'm happy where I'm from. I love Everton. I love Liverpool as a city. I love me mates and family, but there's nothing worse for me than people who force it down people's necks with this horrible accent nowadays. Sometimes the best Scout accents are the nasal Beatles proper Scout accent. It's changed now a lot of it.
Do you know what? I proper get that opinion, because I'm also like, I know you obviously get some stick, which I've just thrown at you then in the first 10 minutes of this show, but it makes me feel better that you don't even have to be proud, but you just completely just carry on where you're from and not try and blag that you're the Scouser. It's even worse if you did that. It's so bad. It's like, because I'm with the BBC over in Salford, it's like people there who are like from St. Helens or Wigan or Bolton, and you know, I get people come up to me from down south and say, "Oh, exactly," because they all, to me, I've always said this, they all sound the same to me. Anyone from that sort of northwest area, even Skelmersdale, like you mentioned there, but like St. Helens, which is like, I don't know, about 4 or 5 miles from where I live here, near Huyton. Everywhere around there, it's like it changes so quickly. It's almost like you're within a few yards of being in a completely different area in the country, you'd imagine, because the accent changes that much. But the amount of times in work that people have come up to me and said, "Oh, Dave, you haven't met such and such over there, have you? He must be around your neck of the woods." I said, "Oh, where's he from?" And he said, "Chorley." I'm like, what are you talking about, Chorley?
I like it.
What am I sounding like here? And I started getting paranoid, thinking, what's wrong with my voice if someone thinks I'm from Chorley?
You know, that's what I love about this accent, though, is that it's such a small catchment area.
Yeah.
It's like, because as you say, out towards Holton Way, it just ends dead, doesn't it? It just like,
I go, do you know what? I'd go as far as it going even closer than that. I mean, I remember when I got when my mum and dad wanted me to be posh, when I got a scholarship for Merchant Taylors in Crosby. And I'm not even joking, mate, going from Crosby, and I lived in Bootle when I was a kid. So Crosby's next door to it, and Lidland's there, and you stay in Lidland. Lidland's quite rough. Where I lived was quite rough in Bootle, but then literally Crosby was less than a mile away. It's the next thing you stepped into. If you went from Lidland, you took one step over the road, and you literally got into Crosby by Marine and all that.
Yeah.
And the accents become posh, but not posh as in, like, I consider Adam as posh, to be fair, because I know as well what he does for his job and whatnot. He's a posh lad. He's a good talker. Do you know what I mean? That's why he's great on podcasts.
Are we talking Steve McManaman phone voice here? Posh. That's all.
Yeah, I think actually, yeah, that's a good equivalent to me, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think when I moved into there, don't get me wrong, going into Merchant Taylors was an absolute shock as a kid, mate. It was. I'm quite proud to have turned out how I have, to be honest with you, as an adult, because when I walked into there from Bootle, and we're from obviously working class family and whatnot, going to school in Crosby, which is, like I said, less than a mile up the road, and kids are there with these ridiculous accents from all over the country talking about going sailing of a weekend with their family and taking a helicopter or something like that. And asking what I'm doing. I'm having a game of footy in the road by ours, where your ball will get burst if it goes into someone's garden. Do you know what I mean? That's the way life was there. But I don't like to hear how we got off on this tangent, by the way. But anyway, it was really good fun to start the show. But we mentioned what I mentioned there at the start initially was that picture, that wonderful picture of Roberto Martinez, who he's in Wigan, which is not Scouse, which is only up the road though from Goodison Park. So, if people are getting itchy feet about Frank Lampard, be careful what you wish for. If it's Bobby that's hanging about town waiting for a chat with Bill Kenwright. But what I want to ask you to carry on from that is, and I've asked this of everybody in the podcast in the recent weeks, what are your feelings immediately towards Lampard? And I want you to answer that in terms of, without really thinking too deeply of this, because it could be like, we could do a whole podcast on talking about Lampard and his tenure at Everton and what you perhaps want to see from him in the future. But what's the first thought that comes to mind with him as our manager about to start the second half of the season where we're going to be in a relegation fight?
Well, I'm immediately worried, but it's more about the personnel in the team, really. The fact that we've not got many options up front. It's like, you look at what happened in the World Cup with Kudus, and you think, if we had assigned him, he would have been great for us. He would have made such a difference up front. So I'm still very much of the opinion of, let's see, we've got to make some quick moves in January. Let's see if we can get an attacker in, 2 attackers maybe, and see where we go from there. The thing is, he is still a very young manager, and he's going to make mistakes, but he's not really going to be given the chance to make too many mistakes. Last season, he changed things after that Palace game, didn't he? He changed Everton around pretty quickly because he thought these players can't do what I'm asking them to do. And he was kind of pragmatic in that way. So I'm kind of hopeful that if things aren't really going well, he's not wedded to a system of playing like Roberto Martinez was, for instance, where, he just had this style of playing and he ain't going to deviate from that for anybody. He's going to just keep doing it and keep doing it. By the way, if Lampard goes and Martinez comes in, we are down anyway. It's like that. There's no exaggeration there. I dread to think what that fella would do with this team, considering how bad he was with the team he had. But anyway, that's another tangent. I just think with Lampard, for me, he's a young manager. He's going to make mistakes. We've made so many mistakes just getting rid of managers in the past. Maybe we're just making the mistakes by getting the wrong manager in the first place. But I think we do need to give him a bit more time and see what happens in January. I think this is on the club more than him, because I'm still so annoyed that he just wrote August off. He wrote off 5 games at the start of the season to go and do the business at the end of the transfer window, which is just pathetic. When you think of the games that, even if we'd have got Mope in, he's not been brilliant, but I think he could have made a difference against Forest because we just didn't have anyone to score the goals against Forest. And I think I saw a tweet from Fabrizio Romano the other day saying, the next few days and weeks, Everton are going to be looking in the transfer market. It's like, we haven't got time for that. It's got to be one of those where January 1st, you've got your targets and you've got them in, and they are in as soon as they can physically play. They're in that team. Yeah. There's no time to waste. A lot of it for me is just on the people running the club, because we're just, the state that we're in. Just on a little quick tangent on this. I know our hands were tied about Richarlison getting sold when he did. And that's a massive indictment on the way the club's been run.
But how soon did they know that? Sorry to interrupt you, but how soon they'll have known that is a long time ago. They'll have known he was off for a long, long time. That is pure neglect, isn't it? Not to have anything arranged for when he left.
Yeah, but what I mean with him actually going as well. Because if you look at the Ajax and Kudus situation, Kudus was he's contracted to Ajax. Ajax is like, no, we're not selling him. Knowing full well there's a World Cup coming up in 6 months. Whatever they could have got for him in summer, they will double that now in January. Yep. Everton could have done the same, but there's such a pathetic state that they were in no position to just say to Richarlison, you stay until after the World Cup, because he was contracted. There was no reason to sell him other than we absolutely had to for financial reasons. And that, to keep hold of him for 6 months, we would have got more than 60 million. Tottenham selling tomorrow to get 100 million for him now after that World Cup. And that just shows the pathetic state that this club is in. And that's kind of why I would sort of nail me colours to the Lampard master bit, because I think I just had enough of the same thing getting repeated. And, as I said, maybe we are getting the wrong managers in. Maybe he's not the right man for the job, but I'd sooner give him a chance other than the Cowboys running the show.
I haven't said what you said there, Les, just to put this to Adam. I think there's a little bit of an irony what Les has said there about Lampard, because I think, we've like he said, we've sacked so many managers, more than half a dozen managers, haven't we, since Mashiri's been in, where you've been like, is that really the necessary thing to do? We've hit the panic button blind at times. He's just done it without even thinking about it, it seems. I mean, I think most people who are in that board do things without thinking. I don't think they've got a brain to think with anyway. But when you go to this Lampard situation, do you feel as, like, just to start off on your question, Adam, do you feel as if it's ironic to sit here and think, you know what, let's keep our faith with Lampard, who's definitely the most inexperienced manager we've had. He's taken over the worst squad that we've had. And what I'm suggesting is, I think he's so against it. It was somewhat of a miracle that we stayed up with him as manager after the Benitez saga and whatnot happened last year. When you get to a position like this, though, and you've got an inexperienced manager who's back right in the rigmarole of having to go through a relegation fight for all of the season, it's probably going to be. Do you not feel as if you take away the context of all the new managers that we've done and we've fired our gun far too quickly, is now not a time, and this is me playing devil's advocate really, do you not look at that, think Lampard now would be the time where you would actually go and get a new manager if you hadn't done all of that nonsense in years gone by?
Possibly, but we can't just ignore the nonsense that's gone by, really, because at the end of the day, if Everton had had Moyes, Martinez, Lampard, then Frank Lampard probably wouldn't be our manager right now, because we've almost got that in the bank to say we've given people time and they've been able to clear a squad out. They've been able to refresh. They've been able to make their signings. Frank Lampard's had maybe a little bit less time than the previous, but the whole reason why we're in this mess is because you look at that squad that Everton have at the moment, there's probably 6-7 managers in there.
Yeah.
That is the problem. Frank Lampard may be a small percentage of the problem. As Les says, he's going to make mistakes. He's inexperienced. He's been at a big club and he's been at a smaller club, and this is maybe his time to almost learn his lessons. But one, he hasn't got time to learn his lessons, and two, that's always going to work against him, really. There's two ways I look at this. Frank Lampard might not be the right man for Everton, but just having a little bit of stability is going to be better than the constant chopping and changing that we've been doing for so long. The second side of it is, I actually like Frank Lampard. He bought into the club. I think some of the signings he's made have been really good, actually. I think looking at us now, looking at us at the start of the season, and August again is something that really, really annoys me as well. There was a period of 6 weeks in between now and August where Everton looked better, more balanced. They were creating chances, looked solid at the back. And the reasons behind those were the players that Frank Lampard had brought in, essentially. Tarkowski, Cody, Onana, Gay. You can possibly throw Mope in there. You could possibly throw Dwight McNeil in there. And then you give your sprinkles of, Anthony Gordon, Nathan Patterson, Mikalenko, who granted were from previous managers. But again, it's a chance to work with a group of players to implement something. Don't know whether it's the right thing that we're implementing, but it's something at least, and give them a clear direction of where to go in. If that's on the field, if it's on the training pitch, or if it's from a recruitment point of view, we just need to give everyone a little bit of time. The caveat is the time might come where these players or this board, again, are just figure happy. The players might throw him under the bus and go, nah, he's not right again, and get us relegated. Or the board might go, right, you haven't won in 5 games, or you've picked up 3 points in 10 games, time to go, and we'll just be back to square one. And back to square one for me is now less than square one, because if we do it again, we'll be in the Championship next season.
I think it's really interesting that you made that point there about something we haven't mentioned yet about the all the shit we've been into for the last 6-7 years now, since Mashiri came in, and we'll get on to the point about people throwing in open letters to him and whatnot. But what you've mentioned there about players, for so many, I think so many of the years that we've had any manager at the football club, a big issue of the entire thing has been due to players for me. You think back to the Schneiderlin times, you think back to the Davy Klaassen times, you think back to Ashley Williams times, and you start thinking players that came in, they actually got whoever was the manager at the time a little bit of a freebie, because we were all sitting there fuming with how much of a gang of shitbags those players look like for us. To throw that question back at you, Distelez first. When you look at that squad we've got now, and Adam mentioned the signings that he made actually look like decent signings, and it's difficult to say, oh, we've signed some really good players when we're in the position we are. I completely understand that, but the names in which he mentioned there, when you look at this squad, you think, you know what, that should be a comfortably mid-table side, but it's not for whatever reason. What do you feel towards that, Les, in regards to the squad of players we have now? This is nowhere near as bad as it's been when we finished in better positions in the Premier League table, is it?
It's on paper, no. The problem is there's nothing up front. There's no. Is
that the only issue for you? This, today I was reading the news, and we've been linked with Chris Wood from Newcastle, and there'll be people who are fuming about that and think, you know what, we're not doing anything like that. But I'll tell you something, mate. You look at all we've got at the moment is Mopai. Calvert-Lewin looks like it, unfortunately for him and everybody else, looks like he's going to be one of those players that just gets injured really, really easily. And I hope he's able to turn that round, because we desperately need him right now. But you tell me about Chris Wood, I'd be like, people would scoff at that. But you look at Everton's situation right now. Could you turn down the possibility of him being the only lad we could go and get in January?
He scored 2 goals for Newcastle, though.
Is that all it is? But he hasn't played much, has he, since they had their takeover?
I just know that after 10 games, everyone was going, I haven't scored any goals, so he just brought someone in.
Yeah. Just a yard dog up front.
It's just what good teams do. We get left with players that don't score goals.
Yeah.
That is the issue.
Go on, Les.
It's not obviously recruitment is difficult, but it's not a difficult concept that you've got to get your recruitment right. You've got to get the players that fit. Not only the way you want to play, but the players you've got around you already. You've got to get someone to fit into your team. Now, I think in the summer, what did work well was we sort of plugged those gaps in defence, like Adam said, sort of there were times between August and the World Cup where we did look all right. You know, we'd stopped conceding goals, and we looked quite solid. But that can only last for a certain amount of time, and the wheels came off against Bournemouth, because if you've got nothing up front, if you've got no outlets, or it keeps breaking down when you get into that final third and the ball's coming back on the defence, there's only so much that you can take, and the cracks develop over time in that, and you can see with those 2 Bournemouth games that it just looked beleaguered. The whole team looked like they'd had enough, and it was a really sort of quick turnaround. I think from that, I know the Palace game was a standout game. We've not been brilliant around that. But I just think when there's nothing to play up to, or you're not getting it, you've got no chance of scoring a goal, or you'll maybe score 1 in, I don't know, 50 shots. We're not even having the shots, are we? There's nothing up front at all, and that all builds pressure on the defence. and the midfield as well, because there's no outlet. We're not taking the lead in any games, and then when we do go behind, you're thinking we're struggling to create chances, so we're going to struggle to score. And it's just a sort of it's a self-perpetuating thing. So I think if we can sort out the striking positions in January, we need to do it as soon as possible, like I said before. But you kind of think, taking the double hit of losing Richarlison, who's done so much in the time he was here, to sort of drag that forward line through, whether he was playing as a 9, whether he was playing sort of out wide. He did everything he could within a game, and he scored a lot of vital goals. And then you take Calvert-Lewin out, who in that season with Ancelotti, I was watching some goals back the other day, and we were just scoring some mad goals with him. Just getting the box in, one touch in. To lose that as well and not replace it, it's gonna take its toll. And I know when you're building a squad or you're rebuilding a squad, you can only do certain bits at a time. You can't do everything at once. I think we've done the round of the defence and the midfield. We now just need to go all out on the attack and sort that out.
What I'll say about that, and I totally agree with what Les is saying there, that the gaps that we needed to fill, as crazy as it sounds, that the whole point of this game that we watch and love is to score a goal and score more than the other team. We needed a brand new midfield. We needed a brand new pair at centre half. We probably needed a new left back and a new right back. We've needed a new right back for 10 years nearly.
Yeah.
But what Lampard and Selwell have almost done is, and by the way, I've probably named about 8 players there that we needed. 3 in midfield, 2 at the back, right back, left back, and you could probably go for a winger, which they went for. What they've done is, with about £2 million, done 80% of what's needed, and then just banked on Calvert-Lewin being fit and playing games this season. Yeah. And the one thing that we needed to almost cover up the cracks up front fell from beneath us. And I've said it to my dad a few times. I've said it to my mates a few times. He's not right, him, Calvert-Lewin. There's something not right with him, as he's too finely tuned to play a period of football that requires 90 minutes, week in, week out, winning flick-ons, holding the ball up, getting in behind, scoring goals. The one thing about Dominic Calvert-Lewin is he's not a natural goal scorer. He doesn't strike the ball well, and Les alludes to that Ancelotti period, is because he was 5 yards out for 99% of his goals, and that's where we love him. That's where we need him. But the position Everton were in last year, and the position Everton are in now, is that we need someone who can play a run of games and just give us something, an outlet, just hold the ball up, bring players in, your Anthony Gordons, your Damari Grays, your Dwight McNeil. And as I say, we've banked on him and it hasn't come through. And the same way that Everton, from a recruitment point of view, is from a monetary standpoint and from a pull standpoint, we're nowhere where we used to be. So they've gone for, here's me forward, here's me first option, won't come. Here's me second option, too expensive. Here's me third option, Neil Mopay. And that's just how Everton have worked over the years. And unfortunately, we say it, Matt Jones says it, we've always said it, there's a reason why players end up at Everton. And Neil
I think I'm going to get that tattooed, by the way, because ever since I've known, we've done the Blue Room for 10 years now. Ever since I've known Matt, I think that every single season that comes to pass, that's exactly spot on, isn't it? There's a reason for players to end up. The one that always sticks to my mind is when we got Luca Dean and everyone was buzzing because we got him from Barcelona. And he always said to me, whenever we'd lose games and whatnot, he'd always used to say, there's a reason why players end up at Everton. The irony now is, just carrying on from what you said there, Adam, is we don't get players ending up at Everton now. It's gone even further away from it, hasn't it? We're not getting players that we want actually turning up. We've just got no players at all turning up in an attacking capacity. And just to throw that a little bit further into the discussion, really, I look with real trepidation when it comes to January, obviously, because you've got a transfer window, but I don't think anybody notoriously has signed top players. I hate that saying, by the way. Signing top class players in the January transfer window simply doesn't exist. If you're not a club like a Man City, if you're not a club like a Newcastle who can go out and do it for relatively nothing with the finances that they've got, I don't think, and I don't know if either of you agree with this, but I mentioned Chris Wood there tentatively, and for most listeners would be quite scared of us signing Chris Wood and having him be the only man that's there to save us goals. But I don't look around for January and think, do you know what, there's a player there we can go and get. I reckon you're probably looking at somebody on loan. I don't think we're going to go out there and buy one. I think even it'll tell us a lot well, it obviously tells a lot anyway, it goes without saying really, but it tells a lot when we get to a position in January where we haven't gone out, like Les said at the start of the podcast, really quite quickly as soon as it gets to New Year's Day, getting someone in as soon as you can. So we've got loads of games coming up in January, which we'll go through in a second, but you can't get to that stage and not have what you need to stay in this league. And I have to say, I don't think I'm exaggerating in thinking that this scares me more than last season about us going down this, you know.
I think that we've got to a point now where in January, and I don't know, I might be wrong, but it feels as though Lampard and Selwell will sit down and go, got two options here. We overpay for someone who might be a little bit of a risk, but is almost going to keep the fans happy because we've made a move for someone, which we all know needs to happen. Or once again, we rely on Dominic Calvert-Lewin to come back and to play for the rest of the season. Either way, it could go very wrong, or we could almost get away with it. The thing that I would do, or the thing I think is almost an option, is to look a little bit further down the leagues, go and get your Brereton Diaz, go and get the lad from Coventry, go and maybe pay, 25 million for a striker that's probably around your 10, 15, but is the profile we all talk of, has been scoring goals this season, is possibly in a position where he wants to take the next step and go and play for a Premier League side, be the main man, score the goals, keep us up, and then push on in his career. If we're going to our Chris Woods, if we're going to our, other players around that ilk who've been there, done that, Premier League experience, I get that shout and I know that, but we've tried that before. Neil Maupay's a proven Premier League player. We need someone a little bit different now.
You're looking at the kids maybe, though?
Even then, it could be a good shout. You're looking at Tom Cannon scoring goals. You're looking at Ellis Sims at Sunderland scoring goals.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a fine balance between those players and you probably the lad at Blackburn, the lad at Coventry. There's probably a couple of diamonds in the rough in the French leagues or your Spanish leagues. They're the ones that are a happy medium at the moment because they're almost low risk, high reward. Or if they're low reward, then you're probably going to recoup a little bit of money for them, where you're going to almost say, right, that wasn't right, but we can play him off, of Calvert-Lewin. We can bring Maupay in, we can have options. What I'm really scared about is that we go big on someone that we think is proven or we think we should go and get. It doesn't work, or we're just stuck with Maupay again if it's an injury or if whatever it may be. The one thing we can't do is sit still. There has to be, as much as I hate it, 3 options or 5 options that you put them forward to Selwell or you put them forward to Managerial saying, we want him, we kind of want him, and there's our 2 at the bottom of the list that might be, if all shit hits the fan, an option. The worst thing Everton can do is stand still and not have someone ready to go in the first week of January, because I'm as scared as you, Dave, if that happens, because I want Dominic Calvert-Lewin to succeed at Everton. I think he's such an athlete that suits Everton. If he can play games and get a bit of confidence and start scoring goals, brilliant. I just don't have faith in that happening.
Yeah, I mean, Les, just to get your turn of speaking about that day, I mean, I was, all we've seen, and it's no coincidence really, because the club are great at doing that, aren't they, that they start trying to show things that aren't football related when we're doing so badly. I just remember them doing things, like I mentioned there, about that Yelovich getting out of a box for the kids' Christmas present and stuff like that. Just stuff to get anybody away from looking at the league table or how the team are doing or whatever. And the thing that we've seen, obviously, quite often in the last few weeks is the new stadium, Bramley Moor. And that's starting to feel like a bit of a juxtaposition for me when I watch it. I'm looking at it thinking, oh, do you know what? This is going to be amazing. But I can't look at it with a clean attitude and think, do you know what? Amazing going to be seeing the derby taking place on there. Because when I see the situation we're in now, I'm thinking, we're going to have a derby there? Are we going to be in this division there? We don't deserve that as fans. How many times have we said it, Les, all the time? We say it on Twitter, we'll say it all over the place. Everton fans don't deserve what we get. And just going back to that question that I mentioned there and what Adam answered, in terms of who we can bring in January, it's a scary proposition to look at and think, how are they going to do this? Thelwell obviously has came in with a fantastic CV, really well spoken of, but even he must look at this and think, oh, what have I signed up for here?
Yeah, the annoying thing is we kind of had the blueprint for this for years.
Oh, yeah.
Because
it's been coming, hasn't it? That's the problem. It's been coming.
But under Moyes, we would, we'd often have a pretty ropey start to the season. We get to December and we'd be like sort of like hovering around the bottom half, thinking, oh, like where are we going here? And then we pick up the second half of the season. We would make decent signings. We get good loan players
and win like 7 in 10 or something like that. Then
we get loan players in from abroad. Now, I think as Adam was sort of alluding to, they're signing someone like Chris Wood. It would just be like, oh, so we're getting Newcastle's cast-offs now. So we used to get Man United's and stuff. Now we're getting Newcastle's. That's how far we're falling down, and that's how it would feel. Yeah, if you went out to, I mean, this sounds like a massive cliche, but if you do go out to a European club and get the equivalent of Chris Wood from someone from Spain, maybe it at least gives you a little bit more hope. It might not work, but it's probably got a better chance of working than Chris Wood, who scored 2 goals for Newcastle. Kind of, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a gamble, but we've done it in the past. And what annoys me is it's like everything that Moyes built up over that time, when it was the whole punching above our weight thing was horrible. I didn't like any of that. But we were a team who were financially, we were doing that. And then as soon as Mashiri came in, it just got wiped clean. We turned into this big spending club, but spent it really badly. And now we can't even revert back to what we were before then. And you can't think, well, why can we not, have a little bit of imagination and go out into Europe? Why is no one scouting players in Europe? Why are we looking at players like, looking at Sarr from Watford? Why aren't we looking at him before he goes to Watford? Because that's the level we should be looking at. We should be looking at players who will come to us and then go, right, I'm going to Man United, I'm going to Man City, something like that. It's horrible to say that. But we shouldn't be looking at Watford players going, yeah, we'll have him. We should be looking at them before they get there, if they're that good. And it's
the only thing
breakdown at the club.
The only thing I think, Les, is that I almost think we've started to do that slightly. You look at Kudus, you look at a few other names that have been in and around, and they've gone and had like a brilliant World Cup. Or
would he come to us though? Would he come? Are we in a position now as a Premier League club? Would he come to us?
No, he wouldn't. Not now, Dave. I don't think he would. You look at Luis Diaz, you look at Kudus, you look at if something, we don't know what the ins and outs are behind the scenes, but if something fell for Everton, you could almost look at Onana, and that was the one that did happen, really.
Spot on.
Because I think he could be and has the ceiling so high to go on and do things. What I agree with, Les, is that we can't go and just do a Chris Wood. We can't go and do, right, he's going to cost us 35 million because he's a Premier League player and he may have scored a couple of goals down the years. There has to be some form of just plan to go and get a little bit of excitement mixed with a little bit of talent mixed with a lot of potential. And even then it'll just get us as fans thinking, right, at least there's a wider net here than the Premier League or than everyone else's cast-offs. Because I do think that Thelwell, the way he works, and I know we've been linked with loads of Wolves players, but there is a real good recruitment strategy there from him. I really do believe he could be brilliant for Everton. He needs to be given the reins. He needs to be given a little bit of time and a little bit of an overview of what we have now and clearing out the deadwood, whatever we say. But if we can get someone in who just falls our way in terms of we get them at the right time before they have that astronomical growth, like your Kudus, like your Luis Diaz, whoever that may be, we can get them in. January might not be the right time to do it because, again, you're going to be paying stupid money, and with stupid money becomes a stupid amount of pressure on that player to come in and score 20, 30 goals in the latter half of the season. But if we can get someone on loan, or we can get someone, as I say, a bit of diamond in the rough, then it could totally change, because Everton win 2 or 3 games in January, or they win on Boxing Day and go and get a couple of results, then it looks totally different. And if you bring in a lad in there, a young lad who's not many people have heard of, we all say it, don't we? We don't know who he is, so he's got to be the answer. I don't want a Chris Wood. I don't want someone that I've seen bully us and then have mares against everyone else. It needs to be something a little bit exciting. And we can talk about fans, Everton fans at the moment, and we're frothing at the mouth essentially. As soon as something goes wrong, we're all happy to wallow in our own shite, but there's a reason why we do that, because there's nothing to get behind, nothing to hold on to. But the holding on to comes from us building something that we can see, and I feel there's something there that we can see. There's a bit more direction. We're starting to build a team and build a way of playing, but as we spoke about, it needs to come down to scoring goals. And if that just feels like something, if we can get in and get it right and get it done well, then it could change our fortunes moving forward.
The variables is what makes me worry so much, and I'm all go back to the summer just gone there, and I know we've spoken quite heavily about the signings that we made, and it looked all decent. It looked 99% of the way there without signing a striker and all that sort of thing. But I look back to the Palace game that we won at home, and I think about myself, that the feeling that I had when we scored that goal, which just give us all that relief that we were staying in the league this season, and coming away from that thinking, please, never again happen. Les, you don't mind me saying this, you're slightly older than the pair of us. You think back to the days against Wimbledon. You know, you think back to, well, I can remember it myself in 98 with Howard when he came back and us just about staying up on the last day. And on each of those occasions, and for everybody who's listening now, remember the summer, that game against Palace and coming away from it with such relief. It felt really, I was upset, to be honest with you, that night, because I know everybody was celebrating, everyone's going nuts, and there's everybody's invading the pitch and all that sort of thing. But I felt really, really sad, to the point of what this club could be if they actually got it right. When you look at how we all reacted when we just about stayed in the Premier League, there's so much potential there all over the place. And we've spoken about this millions and millions of times. But what I also come away with thinking was, never let this happen again by sorting this out in the summer. And then it gave Lampard the blueprint to really kick on and put in a squad that he wants to see. But even then, at the time, the cracks were still there. When you look at the fact that Richarlison was inevitably going to go, there were still fitness issues with Calvert-Lewin, and we still didn't address that. And now we're up to the point of a World Cup. That World Cup, in many ways, might well have saved us quite a lot, because had we continued to play the matches we had on the fixture list that we're going to start again next week, we could be 20 odd games in now and comfortably in the bottom three. Not that I'm saying that there's plenty of ways in which they could have sorted things out in the last 6 weeks that the World Cup's been on. But what I'm saying about it is we get to a position where we haven't addressed what we needed to 6 months ago. And then you get to Christmas where you're like, hang on, these are definite. I know it's a 6-pointer that everyone's going to talk about against Wolves on Boxing Day, but you're looking at it thinking, you know what, we've got to win this, or we're definitely gone down already. That's been a little bit of a godsend that we've got to this stage where you're like, okay, well, we're only 15 games in here. They've still got points to fix it. Problem I've got is, and I think you guys will probably say the same thing, is I don't have any faith that this can possibly happen. I know, Adam, you've mentioned some things there that we can go and do positional wise and what we have to do. The one thing that's saving us, the one thing that is, I don't know, spared our blood so far is defence. The two centre-halves that he got in. Ironically, Cody can't play on Boxing Day, so that's an issue already right there. But those two centre-backs, in my mind, have been the only things that have kept us slightly afloat at where we are right now in 17th place. And it scares me that if either of them got a serious injury, and then you're looking at Mina coming back in, who people are still going to think, oh, he'll be decent, but is he going to stay fit? And then you're looking at having to put Keane back in, or Holgate, who, in my opinion, I don't think they belong in an Everton shirt anymore. That's how close we are. And I don't want to make everybody feel crap, but I already have, haven't I? I feel like Scrooge on the Muppet Christmas Carol here, talking the way I am. But I'm scared, Les. I'm really, really scared.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on something Adam said about Premier League experience players. So we went and bought Mopé from Brighton. Premier League experience. Wasn't a great goal scorer, but you know, he had Premier League.
He's a small Chris Wood, isn't he?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, from Brighton, Coventry signed a striker called Vic. I've just got his name up. Victor Gyökeres. Now he's
well looked at, isn't he? A lot of clubs are apparently looking at him.
There's a lot of people looking at him now. He's 6'2". So if you're looking at a player to play the Calvert-Lewin position, it's probably
ready-made
more than Mopé. And it's like, well, why did we not just go for him? I know he'd been on loan at Coventry the season before, so obviously they had that pull that he'd been there. But surely to God, if Everton are coming in and going, I'll tell you what, we'll have him. He's not going to Coventry, is he?
You know what tickles me, Les, is... Sorry, mate. You know what tickles me is that there's like, you look at this, the lads from Coventry, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, and then you look at Chris Wood. There's never been, I don't believe, like two players like that come into a league and the old guy that's always been in the Prem scores 30 goals. It just doesn't happen. No. It's the new up and coming like flavour of the month that everyone goes like, who's this
yeah.
fella? You don't get the old dog learning new tricks. It just doesn't happen. Everton need to stop going for the old dog. Neil Maupay was never going to come in and score 25 goals. That wasn't going to happen because he's been here, he's done that, and he's playing against the same centre-half that he has done for the past 5 years.
Yeah, and still hasn't managed to get 10 a season.
If you come in and you're a little bit different, you're a little bit unorthodox. You look at Brereton Diaz, and he was awful 3 seasons ago. He puts Diaz on the end of his name, and he's an absolute world beater. I also think, apart from putting Diaz on the end of his name, is that he's probably bulked out a bit. He's gone into a position now where he goes, right, I'm the big man here. I can score goals, a bit of confidence. This is almost quite new to me. And if it's new to him, then it's new to the people who he's trying to back into and turn and roll and run off the back of and score all types of goals. We know what Chris Wood does. You knock it up long and he wins the header. You know what Maupay does? He comes in and turns and tries to run at you, or he tries to get... These are players that have been there, done that, and the T-shirt was never even there to be bought. You need to get players in who are fresh, new, and a little bit unpredictable. It's mad to me that people still think in that way, and everyone seems to think in that way. But
it's a no-brainer, isn't it? It's like you look at the players we've got. Talking about like the Moyes years, which are now like these salad days that we had, which is quite depressing anyway. But it's like you look at that and the players we got from the Championship, and there's no expectation on them coming in, and they come in and they're good players. So long as they fit the profile, decent players, they'll do a good job. And as you say, it's better than getting some 30-odd-year-old who's been running around the Prem for 5 or 6 years and not been doing much. I just don't trust anyone at the club to get it right, really. Even though I guess they bought a bit of goodwill with the last transfer window because it was relatively decent. You then look at things like this, signing Maupay when there was another lad at Brighton who was a better option, and we didn't get. You kind of think, well, what's going on there?
The only probably thing I'll give them there, Les, is that this lad from Coventry, from Brighton, who's gone to Coventry, they probably said we want 25 million up front.
Yeah.
The reason why you get your Maupays, the reason why you get these players is because you say we'll give you 3 million, and in 6 months we'll give you 5, and then in a year we'll give you 10. And unfortunately, Neil Maupay comes to Everton because that deal is structured in that way. And
that's a massive indictment on how bad
it's horrible. It's a double-edged sword, and both ends of the sword are stuck into your heart. Someone's bent the sword round and put both ends into your heart.
We love getting players on drip, don't we? There's all sorts of questions I want to ask you here, but I knew this might well have happened, that we've just ranted on about the way Everton are. So we've got loads more stuff to come before Christmas anyway, before the weekend, before everyone can start enjoying themselves, and hopefully Everton can start enjoying themselves starting on Boxing Day. But
you've got a day
just to finish,
by the way.
You want to say again?
We've got one day to enjoy ourselves, Christmas Day, and then it's all over.
Absolutely right. But before you go, guys, because I know we're going to go now, just looking at those fixtures in January, the one quick thing I wanted to ask you is, we go Wolves at home, City away, Brighton at home, Man City away in the FA Cup. Don't really care about that. Southampton at home, West Ham away. That's January for us until we get to a Merseyside derby, and Arsenal in February. Those 3 home games, I would go as far as saying are must win, in my opinion. Wolves at home, Brighton at home, Southampton at home. I
think at least 7 points.
Yeah, minimum.
I'd say Brighton get a draw. The other 2 got to win, especially Wolves. It's friggin' hell.
Haaland could wear the Santa suit on New Year's Eve, by the way. He must be loving this. Must have been sitting off for 6 weeks, getting ready to come back. That must be an absolute dread. If you're kind of Cody, you've gone out to Qatar, not at a game, but being able to sit in the rain, in the lovely weather for a bit, and then you come back, and the first game back is you can't play against Wolves because it's your former side, and then you've got to take on Erling Haaland when you play Man City. I hope he has a good Christmas, Cody. Really hope he has a really good Christmas, Connor Cody.
I do kind of wish, like, sometimes football was a bit more like cricket, and you can just concede. Just look at that Man City game and just think, it's New Year's Eve. No one's going to be interested. Let's just call it off and just go.
We'd be doing the follow-on a lot, though, Les, in that regard, wouldn't we? couldn't make 200 runs anyway. Listen, boys, I know I'll probably speak to you both anyway before, but have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas with your family and all that. We've got a few more few more podcasts to come before Christmas itself. We'll have loads again when the toffees come back, which I hope people are going to feel a little bit more optimistic than the three of us are, what we've said in the last hour or so. But we hope you enjoyed the weekly pod. Plenty to come on the Blue Room Extra as well. Matt's back as well. He's had a bit of a break. Matt's back with podcast this week, so stay tuned. And thanks so much for listening to us, and we'll be back soon.